Today, we discuss Miro. Today, I want to talk about the hellscape that is technical diagramming, right? Everybody's nodding their heads right now, And there is a potential solution that I want to share. There was one name that several people brought up. I did some digging, and it's kind of nuts how much this program Miro has for developers. I have to share this. It could potentially be a game changer for you. So my favorite part about Miro is that half the work is already done. Like right now, typically we spend hours starting diagrams from scratch, gathering information. You get buy-in from every team. That's a lot of work to do. But Miro has a full set of integrations with the tools you're probably already using. And they also offer open APIs and SDKs for custom solutions for all those niche diagramming use cases we have to do, right? So the end result is the same, but it doesn't take forever. It's a massive, massive time saver. I'm transforming basic flowcharts and network architectures, and it all lives in one place. So are you using Miro? Have you used it? I want to hear. That's MIRO.com.
Picture this nightmare scenario. You're hosting friends for the big game. It's neck and neck in the fourth quarter, and suddenly you realize you're out of drinks. Don't panic, because you can save on a huge selection of beer, wine, and spirits. Then get them delivered to your watch party with Drizzly, the go-to app for drink delivery. Download the Drizzly app or go to drizzly.com. That's DRIZLY.com. Must be 21 plus, not available in all locations.
Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Welcome in to another edition of the JMU Sports News Podcast. I am Bennett Conlon, joined by Jack Fitzpatrick, to talk about the greatest JMU quarterbacks to ever live.
Yeah, this is a list that just cannot create any type of debate. This is probably one of the most true things we could talk about. No one can get upset over this, and I think it's pretty cut and dry. I think it's pretty, copy-paste. It's pretty, whatever, insert analogy here. Before we dive into the list of the best JMU quarterbacks since 2000, we want to let you guys know that BetOnline is your number one source for all of your betting needs. Get the latest odds, lines, and matchup reports for baseball, boxing, golf, and more. BetOnline continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place your wagers, including live betting and your favorite casino and card games, all available to play right from your phone. Head to the website, or you can use your mobile device to sign up and get in on the action. Remember to use promo code BELIEVE, that's promo code BLEAV, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. So you throw $100 in there when you sign up with promo code BELIEVE. BetOnline will hook you up with $50 free. BetOnline is where the game starts.
It's just all fact-based stuff, right?
It kind of was fact-based stuff. Like that's a funny, with how I wrote this, I took the eye test completely out of this article, the greatest JMU quarterback since 2000. I took the eye test out of it, and I really did craft it without bias.
Based largely on stats and then postseason success, right? So there's you did create a formula, and we're referring to this article you posted on JMUSportsNews.com ranking the best quarterbacks in JMU history.
Yeah, originally we weren't going to have a podcast to accompany it, but we thought with all the kind of discussion that came around it and the discussion me and you had that came out of this and the discussions our friend and I, Dom, had about this, you just can take this in so many different ways. But the formula for this was 1 point for every 1,000 total yards, 1 point for every 10 total touchdowns. And the reason we use total yards and total touchdowns over passing yards and passing touchdowns was to try and account for the dual threat ability of a Rodney Landers, of a Vad Lee, because a lot of their yards came not necessarily through the air. A lot of their touchdowns came with their feet. So we wanted to kind of account for that as well. Negative 1 point for every 5 interceptions thrown. So 2 interceptions gets 1 touchdown taken off the board. 1 point for every postseason win. 1 point for every time their name appears in the record book for a career or season record. So Vad Lee didn't get a point for his record-breaking performance against SMU for most total yards by a JMU player, but he got 13 other points for his career and total season yards. And then 5 points for winning a national championship.
Yeah, it's a, we put a lot of good thought into this. And take us through your list. It's just post 2000.
Yeah, post 2000. So I put it in the article, and I want to say it now that it is worth mentioning the guys like Eric Williams, Mike Colley, Greg Maddux, some of the guys that were big time for the Dukes pre-2000. Eric Williams was a quarterback from 89 to 1992. Colley took over 93 to 95, and Greg Maddux was 1996 to 1998. So all of them had really good careers. They're top 10 in the all-time total yards category. But the eras are just completely different. Honestly, the eras, and some of the readers pointed this out about how Mickey Matthews guys should get just 10 points for playing in a Mickey Matthews offense. And I don't think that's entirely wrong, but like just the difference in Everett Withers to Curt Cignetti is drastic. So when you go from like 2023 to 1993, the game is just a very different game than it was then. So we thought we'll put the cutoff at 2000, and we'll do Todd Centeio, Cole Johnson, Ben DiNucci, Brian Shore, Vad Lee, Michael Birdsong, Justin Thorpe, Rodney Landers, and Justin Riscotti.
Good group of quarterbacks.
And the rankings, number 1 is Brian Shore. Maybe I should sort of start it from 10. 9 is Justin Thorpe. 8 is Michael Birdsong. 7 is Todd Centeio. Number 6 is Ben DiNucci. Number 5 is Cole Johnson. Number 4 is Vad Lee. Number 3 is Justin Riscotti. Number 2 is Rodney Landers. And number 1 is Brian Shore.
What do you think about your own list? You like your own list?
I think I like my own list. I think it may account for postseason success a little bit too heavily.
Sure.
Because Shore, granted, it's tough because like Shore really did do everything you wanted a quarterback to do. He won games, he won on the biggest stage, and he won a lot, and he won consistently. He had one of the longest winning streaks in the nation. He won a national championship. He almost won a second one. And because of that, like that is why he's, according to this formula, the best quarterback in JMU history. The formula favors that. Like Justin Riscotti is number 3, but I think some of his stats are worse than Vad Lee, but he won a national championship, and Vad had no postseason wins. And because of that, it really pulls him down. Rodney Landers may have been first if we threw out all postseason stuff, because he only had one postseason win and never had a national championship. But you got to account for that, because as JMU fans, we all talk about the postseason so much and about how they're national title, or how they were national title contenders every year in the FCS. So to me, that's a big thing. It doesn't matter if you win 9-10 games in the regular season. If you were falling flat on your face each and every year in the postseason, then you aren't considered a great JMU quarterback. And this long hole soapbox, I'm not saying Rodney Landers fell flat on his face. He ran into some extenuating circumstances in 2008. A weird injury kind of derailed the game against Montana. He was only in there for like one drive. And in 2007, he lost by 1 point to App State. So not saying that he fell on his face, but Ben DiNucci may have been able to get a couple more points in there if he didn't throw 5 interceptions against Colgate.
Yep, that all makes a ton of sense. It's an interesting one with the postseason, because it feels like there's a big difference between how like college quarterbacks are viewed and like pro quarterbacks in terms of postseason success.
Yeah.
Or I think some fans are willing to excuse on the college level, like maybe not a ton of postseason. It's a little different, right? FBS to FCS, because bowl games don't carry like, you don't really add to your legacy by winning like the Meineke Car Care Bowl.
Why was I going to say the exact same bowl as that?
That's a big one, man. But if you win like the Cheez-It Bowl or the Duke's Mayo Bowl, obviously it's a legacy builder.
Oh, yeah. I mean, getting your coach doused in mayonnaise.
That's huge. It's just an interesting one, I guess, partially because there are more teams and bowl games are different. But right at the NFL level, if you're a quarterback without a Super Bowl, you're not even close to mentioned on like one of the best to ever do it. Maybe within a franchise, but not of all time or things like that. So that's interesting. But even across sports, like Odyssey Alexander, if the softball team, loses to Tennessee in the regional her senior year, is looked at quite differently than carrying the team to Oklahoma City, which it added a lot. Like if she had beaten some of those teams, Missouri, for example, or Oklahoma in the regular season, it wouldn't have carried the same weight of doing it on the stage that she did. So I do think there is some value and should be some value, especially when you look at mostly FCS quarterbacks, that postseason success. So I do like that you had that in there. I thought that was a nice add.
Thank you. So what are your thoughts? I mean, how would you have ranked? Let's go with just the top four. What are your top four, or who did you think was going to be the top four before I embarked on this adventure?
Yeah, it's a good question. I thought Landers and Shore would be in the mix, certainly. I think like your four makes a ton of sense. I don't have much of a gripe with it. I really liked Vad Lee and think his level of play, had they been able to tackle at all during his time there, I think he would have obviously gone down much differently. The stuff he did, like the SMU game where he's the only quarterback across like any level to run and pass for 250 plus yards in the same game, is disgusting. Like that's an absurd. Like if a JMU running back ran for 250 yards in a game this next season, regardless of competition, we would be thrilled.
Yes.
For him to do that in their lone like FBS game that season was wild.
And throw for another 250.
Yes. And SMU sucked defensively. So I will throw that in. But still, it's incredible.
It also helped that JMU defense sucked. And
right,
so it was like a 56-52, like just
yeah.
shootout.
They needed him to do all that he did. But he was really, really good. So I would maybe have him higher, I guess, on my personal list. But some of it, too, it comes back to like who I watched play. And I was there right when Shore and Lee were in school. So it makes it, I guess, for me, there's like the emotional connection, which is hard. And I think that's why a lot of people were, maybe not a lot of people, but some people will get adamant about Landers, is that they watched him play, week in, week out, whether it was on streaming or TV or whatever they had when Landers was there.
I think it was Comcast Sportsnet.
Yeah, exactly. Or in person with some of these. And it makes you really want to it makes you believe in the guy and what he was able to do because you have all these stories. I think with time, it only sort of gets better, which is what confused me about this. Is I don't know if you feel differently, but it almost feels like Shore in the moment was beloved. In the last few years, because of the good quarterback play, has almost just been like, oh yeah, it was Brian Shore.
Yeah, like we forget what Brian Shore. It does feel like we have forgotten what Brian Shore not only did for the university, but like did on the grand scheme of FCS football. Like, what, won 26 games in a row? That is absolutely unheard of. Is a Terrence All's drop away from winning back-to-back national titles and cementing a perfect season. Like, if he does that, I don't think there is any argument here. But, like, he finished his career with a loss. Granted, so did Landers, but Landers did it with an injury. And it is kind of crazy how, from Brian Shore, I think you've had more dynamic quarterbacks since him. Maybe not Cole Johnson. Cole Johnson was maybe just Brian Shore 2.0, but you've had Ben DiNucci and Todd Centeio, and these are two guys that were just complete dual threats. DiNucci went on to start a game in the NFL. Let's not talk about the circumstances around it. And Todd Centeio is going to go on to be a really good XFL quarterback, in my opinion. Like, those are two really good guys, and Brian Shore, he didn't really have that next step in his career. I believe he's a graduate assistant for Georgia Southern now.
He's with Georgia Southern, doing some like offensive analyst stuff. I believe.
So he's the reason we lost, but whatever.
Yeah, he cooked our defense.
Let's not bring that. Maybe that's why he's hated by the JMU fans. But like, I do think Brian Shore deserves more respect from the JMU fan base. I don't think this should be a question. I think, and I want to get your take on this, and I put it in the article. Do you think Rodney Landers is beloved so much? And I watched his highlights. I sat here in this seat for 30 minutes just watching Landers' highlights, and it's amazing. He was Vad Lee, but like a human wrecking ball. He was the starting running back and the starting quarterback. But do you think he's so beloved because his career is a what if? Like, what if he doesn't get injured against Montana?
I think there's some of that. I think some of it is just the highlight stuff. And it seemed, and I also, they kind of went through a stretch after him where they almost until that, where the quarterback play was certainly not nearly as dynamic. It's hard to get followed up with, like Brian Shore got followed up by really good quarterback play, or at least mostly good quarterback play between DiNucci, Cole Johnson. You're looking at Centeio, right? Pretty solid stuff. from those guys, especially now with like the FBS move. It just feels like there's a lot more going on. When I think in like 2012, 2013, if you're a JMU fan, you're probably just like longing for the Landers days. So I think that is a factor. I think the other thing is that for whatever reason, we've kind of just dubbed Brian Shore as like a game manager, which isn't entirely untrue. But he's not like the most athletic quarterback they've ever had, didn't have the strongest arm. But it's not like he wasn't athletic. Like he could move. He made a lot of plays scrambling. He ran the ball really productively, was a physical runner. Again, not like Landers, but his completion percentage was also nuts. He did it in a Donnie Kirkpatrick, Mike Houston scheme that kind of sucked with Ben DiNucci. Like, right, he didn't have the Cignetti offensive staff that's like worked wonders with everyone else. He was really good and kind of doesn't get the credit that he deserves in terms of the fact that he wasn't just a game manager. Yes, he managed the game, but he also made a lot of huge plays, especially in crunch time, kind of outside of that final game, the loss against North Dakota State in the national title. But he did win in the Fargo Dome. He sort of orchestrated that Weber State comeback. Like, there's a lot of things that he did that were really good that sort of go overlooked because there's so much talk about like the Houston era and the rise of the program that it's sort of like, oh, we got good at defense. And it became this great thing. It's like we also had like really steady and elite quarterback play from Shore that DiNucci and Johnson got close to, but did not entirely meet. They kind of faltered on bigger stages more than Brian did.
Shore had 8,241 total yards.
That's so good.
That's a lot. He had 21 rushing touchdowns. That's a lot for a quarterback over only 2 years starting. So he averaged more than double-digit rushing touchdowns a year, which is really good. And, like, he made us think that Houston was a good QB coach.
Right.
And then, like, he goes on to have DiNucci, and then they just fall apart. And then Holton Ahlers never really lived up to anything at ECU. No offense to him. But, like, the hefty lefty, we all thought that, like, Houston was going to be able to craft these great quarterbacks because of what Shore did. And it just is insane to me. He doesn't get the love he deserves. He was the perfect quarterback at the perfect time. And things like that don't happen often in sports. And we shouldn't punish him for being the perfect quarterback in the perfect system. We should celebrate him for taking on that role and be willing to be the game manager at times, but also to push the ball down the field. He had the most interceptions out of everyone on this list. He had 22 interceptions over his career, which tells me he knew when to push the ball down the field. He was willing to take some chances. But the kicker in all that, there really weren't many interceptions that killed games for the Dukes coming by way of Brian Shore.
No, and he did a lot. I think he did a lot of things where it's like Landers, you watch him, it's like that's like so much fun to watch. Brian Shore had some of those plays, but at the same time, he did the little things really well that are like just not sexy, like managing the pocket, right? Like maneuvering around in the pocket and moving up, stepping up in the pocket, doing things that are like you watch it back and you're like, oh, wow, that was like really good. Where I think DiNucci and Cole Johnson sometimes kind of struggled where DiNucci or whatever, especially his first years to start, would kind of panic sometimes when the rush would come and stop looking downfield. Brian Shore, you go back, watch some of his highlights. He has a lot of like really good throws where he just gets clobbered.
Yes.
Like he stays in the pocket, delivers a throw, and just gets decked. He also, the year that won the championship, breaks his collarbone in like November and then is back in December with like not a fully repaired one based on what he told us and like what the trainer was saying.
I was going to say, yeah.
Like don't get hit in the postseason. And he played really well throughout that postseason. So there's also like a toughness level that I think was impressive. He really was like a Pennsylvania quarterback. You could sort of tell that he played high school there as just a cold weather, tough, gritty quarterback. And
all right, your Pennsylvania is showing.
But he fits like the Pennsylvania mold. And he's just a super talented, good quarterback that I feel like in the moment was really appreciated. And now weirdly enough has kind of almost like lost some of that. And perhaps it's maybe what you said where he didn't go on and do anything after, where like Vad played in like 14 different leagues. And DiNucci, right, played in the NFL. I think that's kind of added to DiNucci's flair a little bit.
DiNucci was hated. DiNucci was legitimately hated when he was a JMU quarterback. And now he's like talked about like everyone loved him from. We were the only people that liked DiNucci.
There are a few loyalists that stayed along, but it was few and far between.
It's interesting, but like you said, Shore now as time has gone on, I think in the minds of JMU fans, and if you disagree with us, please let us know on Twitter, in the comments of this article, like wherever you can talk to us. Let us know that you disagree. But it seems like the overarching vibe from JMU Nation is that Shore is now like the 5th best quarterback we've had in the last few years. Like that he's behind Cole, he's behind Ben, he's behind Todd, he's behind Vad. It seems like he's back there now in like this current mix of quarterbacks we have.
Definitely some weird conversations about sort of how he fits in, but he's really good. His completion percentage was super high. I think the game manager title is a little bit made up, but it's at the same time he did manage games, but well, and had some athleticism that goes undervalued. So it's interesting for sure. I get that other people like other players, and at the same time, like if you have Landers one, like I get that. I think some of it's hypothetical, right? Where it's like if he would, there's so much of that too, where it's like if he had this coach or that defense,
yes,
which you can do for Vad, you can do it for Landers, you can even do it for Shore in some ways. You can do it for pretty much everybody on the list. You can say, hey, what if Hudson Teo was here for 2 years? There's a lot you can throw out there for sure.
Also, some fans, and we can get back to the list, but I was kind of scrolling through some of the mentions from the article just to give us fuel to keep talking here. People were bringing up Drew Dudzik about a guy I left off the list. I didn't leave him off. I purposefully didn't include him. It wasn't like a forget. And this is no shade to him. He's gone on to be a good coach in the NFL, and he was rumored to be potentially the coach for JMU when Cignetti was hired during that round of hiring. But he wasn't a good quarterback. Let's not let the Virginia Tech win kind of shade the fact that in his career, he had one more touchdown than interception, and in his one full season as a starter, he threw for just 1,282 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions, and ran for 345 and 5 touchdowns. And then he couldn't beat out Thorpe in 2009, like the year before. So, like, Dudzik, the only reason he started that year was because Thorpe got injured and, like, things just kind of fell that way. Dudzik did a fantastic thing, and he's going to live in JMU lore forever. He beat Virginia Tech. That's awesome. There's always going to be that picture of him being, like, hoisted with the Lane Stadium built scoreboard behind him. But Dudzik wasn't a good quarterback, and he he wouldn't have cracked the top 9 on this list.
No, I think that's fair. I think there's definitely some revisionist history at times. It's also hard if you don't go and look at the numbers. I enjoyed the fan engagement. I knew people would get kind of fired up about it. I think overall, though, a pretty solid list that makes a lot of sense. Were there any fan sort of feedback that surprised you at all? Was it mostly Dudzik, or is there anything else that kind of caught you by surprise?
Probably the Dudzik one, but also the people just playing the what if game.
Yeah.
Like me personally, I think I've gone on this podcast a few different times, like complaining about the what if game, where they're like, well, what if you had Landers in, like what you were saying? What if Landers had Shore's defense? Okay. What if Shore had Terrence Alls catch the ball? Like he's sitting there with 2 national championships. Right. Like there's just so many different what ifs you can play. And I knew the Landers love was deep, but I didn't think it would be so deep that, like, and I'm not saying my formula is like the end all be all. This is how we rank quarterbacks from here on out in JMU history. But like it didn't have any bias in it. There was no eye test to this. It was numbers, and it was just kind of crazy to me how people were like, they would see it and they'd be like, you discredited Landers. You didn't give him all he's worth. He should get 15 more points because he's Rodney Landers. It's like, well, he did only throw for that many yards, and he did only throw for that many touchdowns, and his name is all over the record books. He had the most records of all the quarterbacks I looked at, but at the end of the day, his postseason lack of success is why he's number 2.
I think that's fair.
And he could have won in 2007. He could have won the App State game. They lost by 1. And people who are like, don't you want a quarterback who can win it at the last play of the game? No, I want a quarterback that can win it in the second quarter. That's what Brian Shore did.
He also made some big, like, fourth quarter drives. Like He had a few really memorable moments with the pass to John Miller to beat or sort of clinch the win over North Dakota State. They had one championship season where they beat Richmond 47-43, and he had a late touchdown to Kloosterman that was clutch.
The New Hampshire comeback? No, not the New Hampshire. That was a New Hampshire meltdown. Never mind.
The meltdown that sparked the rest of their season. The Weber State comeback where he made some huge plays. Trying to think if there are any others that stand out, but he made a bunch of really good, consistent plays, and definitely like the rise of the defense helped him. But he was a solid player. I was a little bit surprised that there were a couple, and maybe it was just one or two, but people were like, "Short won, like that's crazy." I thought that was surprising to me, but people couldn't even see the case for Brian. With like, given the fact that he's thrown the most touchdowns in JMU history
and the most
as a national championship, like it was very confusing that some people were surprised he was at one.
Another thing that surprised me was just the gap between Cole and Ben, because Ben made it all. Granted, his first year in 2018, he didn't win a single postseason game, so that kind of impacts him. But the next year he goes. Did they win one that year?
They beat Delaware, but it was one of the worst, like least memorable games they've ever played.
So, but even then, then the next year he goes to the national championship, and that's awesome. Yeah. I didn't think the gap between him and Cole would be 4.2 to be exact. I thought Ben would actually be higher than Cole.
Do you think Cole's underrated?
No.
You don't?
Because the start of his career was so bad.
It wasn't horrible.
It wasn't good, though. He got benched.
You mean like when he was like
2020, when he got their starter. What he did in 2016, isn't that funny? He became the full-time starter in 2020, and his first appearance was 2016.
What he did a decade earlier.
But what he did in 2016 when Shore broke his collarbone and came in and did what he had to do to secure, what was it, like a top 4 seed in 2016? That was massive.
Yeah. He's fascinating to me, though, because
he was there for 18 years.
It's wild when you look at the touchdown passing records in a single season, and 2 quarterbacks have ever thrown 30 or more. I forget who threw 30, but
Vad.
Was it Vad threw 30? So Vad's at number 2 with 30 touchdown passes in a season. And then Cole's first with 41.
Yeah.
Which is wild. If they didn't have that special teams meltdown against Sam Houston, I think they win that national championship, which I think changes how Cole is viewed.
Which is another what if. If we're going to play this what if
game. I guess it was a spring one, so it might not have been.
It would have been a Mickey Mouse one, but it still
wouldn't have been quite as legacy building. But that would have been interesting to see them win a national championship. What would that have given him? What was that, 5 points in year?
If he was the national champion, he would have taken over Vad. He would have been at 27, and Vad's at 24.
I wonder too, if they win that championship, how that changes preseason expectations, seeding the next year. Because remember, Signetti was so mad that they got the 3 instead of the 2 and had to play at North Dakota State. And he made a comment post game, which was rather silly, that they would have won the game at Harrisonburg, which is just a ridiculous what if. I cannot wait for the fall because Signetti says some just hilarious things. But that'd be crazy because maybe I'm not saying they're definitely getting 2, but at least if he gets 1, he's over Vad in your thing, and then you got him at the point where he could have really gone crazy if they didn't have that complete meltdown there.
Yeah, I mean, they win that, and then potentially, he could have he kind of reminds me of Shore, where he wasn't flashy or anything like that, but he just was going to stand in the pocket, do what he needs to do, maybe tuck the ball, run a little bit. But Cole's another guy that I think over time, hopefully history is kind to him, unlike it has been to Brian Shore. I think it's very interesting that Landers and Lee, the two guys that when you watch eye test wise, I think those are the best quarterbacks we've ever seen at JMU.
Yeah.
That another surprising thing to me was that Landers wasn't even close to Shore. They were about 7 points off. So even if Brian Shore doesn't win that national title, you say subtract 6 points because that's subtract a postseason win and a national title, he's still above Rodney Landers, which that was kind of the mind-blowing thing to me, which shows that postseason success was a big thing. But also just that the stats Brian had accumulated kind of put him in that upper echelon.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because his stats are great. I think someone pointed out that they felt it wasn't fair to dual threats, which I kind of get in the sense that it's harder. It's harder to rush for 100 yards than it is to pass for. Like Vadley's 250 performance, the rushing part's way more impressive than him throwing for 250. So I get where they're saying, like, if a guy was more of a runner at the same time, it is the quarterback position, right? So it's like it's harder to do that. So that's why I think people are like so impressed with Landers, because like Brian Shore, like physically would have had so many carries to run for like 1,700 yards in a season. I think that's part of where the Landers love is. It's like Brian physically could not have done that unless they were running him like 50 times a game, which would have been just comical, very strange. But like to run for that many yards is absurd as a quarterback. So I think that's why it's so impressive. But at the same time, like if you have 300 yards of total offense and 3 touchdowns, like it doesn't really matter. Like the scoreboard isn't like Landers ran that one in. It's 14 zip Dukes, right? Like if you score a touchdown, it's a touchdown. So that's why I think Shore was so good, is he was just consistently leading the offense to touchdowns, less flashy than running for it, right? When you throw for 250 instead of like running for 250 as a quarterback, which is again wild. But I don't know. I like the system. I get what people are saying because like to your eye, if somebody's running the ball like a lunatic, I think it's like, wow, that's the best quarterback I've ever seen.
Okay, here's how Miro works. See, it's amazing.
What's everyone doing at David's desk? Ever since marketing started using Miro's collaborative online whiteboard, he thinks all our other teams should sign up. Why? He says Miro's making his meetings disappear. And if every team gets on it, that means even less meetings. They're using Miro for brainstorms, mind maps, customer research.
So could we use Miro instead of having another 100 meetings for every round of feedback?
Yep. You can comment, react to ideas, even leave a recording on the board.
And what about presentations?
There are Miro templates for that.
How do you know so much about Miro?
I've actually been using it all along. I just used a Miro board to plan the best vacation.
Okay, I'm on board.
See how Miro users save up to 80 hours every year by meeting less and doing more. Get on board at Miro.com with 3 boards free forever. That's MIRO.com.
Picture this nightmare scenario. You're hosting friends for the big game. It's neck and neck in the fourth quarter, and suddenly you realize you're out of drinks. Don't panic, because you can save on a huge selection of beer, wine, and spirits. Then get them delivered to your watch party with Drizzly, the go-to app for drink delivery. Download the Drizzly app or go to drizzly.com. That's DRIZLY.com. Must be 21 plus, not available in all locations.
But I get the stats, and I kind of agree that Brian. But here's what I would wonder: if you took out the championship, would you agree with him still at being number one? No national championships for sure.
So the numbers would make me agree, right? But right. I think my mind wouldn't allow that. Because after watching the Landers stuff, I truly because before this, everyone talked about Landers. I had watched a highlight here and there, but I hadn't sat down and watched his Hall of Fame entrance video with the guys talking about his will to win. He would never lose. And I was like, oh God, this guy was fucking intense. All right. But watching that and then watching other highlight reels and highlight packages, I get it. I get why he was loved. He was fun to watch. But Shore got the national championships, blah, blah, blah. So if Shore doesn't have that and they are closer, I think in my mind I would put Landers over him. I also think Vad. But then when you get into that category, just throwing out
4. If he doesn't win a natty, Riscotti would have a natty, and then Landers and Vad I think might be ahead in my mind. That's what's so interesting is for me, the national championship carries a ton of weight.
Was the last national title JMU won in 2016?
Yeah.
Why do we act like we're so much more important?
Because they lost 2 in that span, and then also 2 semis.
All right.
So they were getting so close that JMU fans were like, "We're North Dakota State, basically." And North Dakota State fans were like, "We're actually winning the national championships." We're like, "We're close though.
We're almost there."
It's like, remember when we beat you in the dome one time, and then we moved up, and now we're just like, "Yeah, we're They're beneath us.
Yeah, the FCS playoffs is a joke. I will say, too, Todd Centeio, he finished 7th, which in and of itself is pretty amazing, considering he did that in just 10 games played, 9 games healthy in a Duke's uniform, because he missed homecoming, and then against Louisville, he was injured and couldn't throw a ball more than 5 yards. But so he finished with 10.3 points. That was ahead of Michael Birdsong and Justin Thorpe. But if you then account for the fact that he did all of that in only 9 games fully healthy and against FBS opponents week in and week out, I gave him a 25% boost kind of on the side just for fun.
I think that's fair.
He still would have finished behind Danucci.
Yeah. Yeah. He would have been, he's an interesting one because it was right just the 1 year. Here's a good question for you. An FBS quarterback, what would it take for them to pass Shore at the top of the list? Obviously, the formula would have to maybe be tweaked or whatever because you're not picking up you're probably not winning a national championship, and it would be different than Brian's.
I think you would. How I would adjust the formula is I think a Sun Belt championship would be 5 points.
Okay.
Plus probably 6 points because it's a postseason win too. So maybe Todd should have gotten. Well, he didn't get the Sun Belt championship because
a boost for the East or whatever.
But say he gets a 3-point boost for the East, whatever it is. I think you just kind of have to jerry rig what your postseason is, and I think it's a Sun Belt title game and then a bowl wins probably 5 points.
Yeah,
just to kind of and maybe like a 10% boost can sit maybe 11 points for every 1,000 yards.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one
because if McLeod goes and orchestrates a 2-loss year, he can't do it this year. Next year, orchestrates a 2-loss year. They're bowl eligible. They win the Sun Belt. And then they go to at that point, it's the expanded playoff, right?
Yeah. So you could theoretically be one of the 12.
Theoretically, they're a 2-loss team. They win the Sun Belt. And maybe they're the best group of 5 teams, so they get in the playoff, and he wins a playoff game? Is he the greatest JMU quarterback of all time?
That's what I'm interested to see.
I think so.
What's it going to take in this new era? Because it's going to be so much harder to compare, which I think will make for fun debates. But just to be what takes you over the top. They're also at a point, too, where if Alonzo Barnett wins the job and stays, congratulations. You have such a perfect chance to be the greatest ever, because they haven't had Shore had 2.5 years basically, because Vad got hurt, he finished the season, and then he had 2, maybe a little less than 2.5, but 2.25. If they could have somebody like Barnett, if you had a 4-year starter, I'd be fascinated to see sort of how they go down. Guy. What's that?
They had a 6-year guy.
Cole Johnson, 6-year starter. But it's what could he do if he was given the reins for multiple seasons? So it'll be a fun discussion to monitor in future years for sure.
Yeah.
One last question for you.
Okay, hit me.
Who is on your list? Who is either the most interesting or the biggest what if, where you can come up with multiple questions and be wow, that's the what if that stands out to me. If they answered that, it would change everything.
Well, I think it's Landers, isn't it? Okay, I'll say Landers is the easy one, but I'll also say Centeio. But let me start with Landers. Landers, it's what if they don't lose to App State by 1 in 2007? Because that year, App State goes on to the national championship. So, it's not a 1-for-1 comparison, but you're 1 point away from App State. So, in theory,
right,
you could then do what App State went on to do. So then that year you have 4 playoff wins and a potential 5-pointer national championship. That takes you to number 1. Then in 2008, you get injured in the quarterfinal. So then when you start the semifinal, you're not 100% because according to that Hall of Fame speech, they knew all week that Landers wasn't fully healthy. So you then go into the Montana game, maybe he's fully healthy, and then that you could probably win that game and then go to the national championship. So I think Landers has a lot of what ifs in his playoff career that could drastically change everything. And I think, like we said earlier, that's a big reason why he is so beloved. Not only is he this human highlight reel, but his postseason career is just a major, major what if. Flipping it to Todd, what if Todd played 2 years? What if he was Ben DiNucci, Vad Lee, Brian Shore, Cole? Like, what if he would? I think Todd statistically could have been around the Vad Justin Riscotti spot.
Yeah, he was pretty special last year.
Like, he etched his name in the record books, and he was only in there for 9 games.
He was big time. Big time. I think my favorite is Cole, because Cole went from literally was going to lose the job to Gage Maloney if it wasn't for a COVID outbreak, to having an 11 touchdown lead in the single season passing touchdown list. Like, that's absurd. He's just definitely the funniest, where it's like, what if they don't get COVID and he never starts a game again? Or like, what if they don't melt down against Sam Houston State and you're thinking of him as a top 3 quarterback that they've ever had?
Also, what if, Gage comes in, they don't have the COVID outbreak, and Cole's the one that transfers to Bryant. Does he become Bryant's all-time leading passer?
And like, what would they have looked like with Gage? Because people would have bought into that. Like, because they probably could have won a bunch of games just like, he did lead them back with like an Elon comeback.
Yeah,
he looked really
good.
And they could have just pounded the rock with him and like done some play action and probably won a ton of games, and people would have like loved him.
Probably not have had a meltdown against Sam Houston State.
Yeah, he was a lefty who would just run it well. That would have been fascinating if that was how it played out and he had like a lot of time. Because Houston loved him. Houston was always talking. He's like, Gage Maloney will be the future of JMU football one day. And Cole Johnson was like, no thanks, I'm staying for 12 years and you're going to get a horribly timed COVID outbreak. He's a hilarious what if for sure.
Another weird what if that I completely understand why the if happened, but like, if Mickey Matthews doesn't get fired and Michael Birdsong is there for another year, because Birdsong left to go to Marshall after Mickey Matthews was fired. Everett Withers comes in, brings in Vad Lee. I think I don't know when exactly Birdsong transferred, but he saw the writing on the wall. He knew he was not an Everett Withers quarterback. A 6'5", like 247 quarterback who runs downhill was not the way Everett Withers wanted to play football. But I mean, his 1 year in 2013, he had, I think, the 7th most total yards in a single season by any JMU player. What if Matthews doesn't get fired? He sticks around. Granted, he did have a little bit of an interception problem. They did only go 6-6 with him. So how many yards were those actually good? How many of those were garbage time yards? But that could have been a fun what if.
And then Vad's obviously a great what if. So many what ifs across the board. Vad's a great one if they have a defense, if he doesn't get hurt. I think there was, and I don't think I'm making this up, I think this is something that I remember in college. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I believe it was floating around the athletic department. If they had beaten Richmond on College game day and Vad didn't get hurt, they were literally going to do an internal Heisman campaign for Vad, like with social media and stuff, to try to get the FCS guy to get a vote. Because I don't think it was like Steve McNair was like one of the few FCS guys to ever actually get a vote for the Heisman or something. So I think they were going to push like Vad Lee Heisman campaign, which would have been just hysterical because people would have leaned into it. They were undefeated, couldn't play any defense. He's putting up insane stats, but obviously didn't go that way. His talent level was insane.
Here's another what if with Vad. Is he this high if they have a defense? If everything else is the same, not as much postseason, no postseason success. He didn't win a single postseason game. He had to put up all of those stats because the defense couldn't stop water.
I think if they had a defense, the other part of the what if changes. Like, I don't think the results would have been the same.
That's good.
Because if they could play consistent defense like they did sort of the 2017 season with his like dynamic playmaking, they would have been absurd.
Here's a take that I don't think anyone would disagree with.
Oh, yeah.
If you put any of the top 7 quarterbacks onto the 2016 team defense, they all win the national title. So does that diminish what Brian Shore did?
2016 is interesting, though, because 2016, the defense definitely got better as the year went on. There were a few games in there where they were giving up some points, like the Richmond shootout where Brian had to play really well to help lead him to that win. It's an interesting question for sure, because you can kind of go back and forth. Let me pull up his Richmond stats that year because they were pretty good. Richmond game.
But like, couldn't Landers have done the same?
I don't think it even updated. Yeah, I think Landers probably could have done that. That's one of the what ifs, right? Is if you stick it on certain teams, how does it go? And then if you get into the postseason with the defense starting to play well, you're probably in a pretty good pretty good spot at that point. He was 22 for 28, 285, 3 touchdowns, no picks, ran for 91 yards and a score. He was electric in that one.
All right.
But yeah, that's a fair question. Who okay, let's say you're starting a team. Who's your pick?
All in their prime, so it's not current day.
All in their prime, and we'll just assume it's like an above average defense.
All in their prime and above average defense. I might get some hate for this. I think I'm going Vad.
I'm going Vad too. That's what makes it such a hard thing, is like both of us are like, yeah, Bryant's the best. And then we're like, if you had to pick one, we're like, yeah, probably Vad or Landers.
Because Landers was my second pick.
Yeah,
Shore's not probably a top 5 pick. Well, okay, so my top 5 would be...
I don't think so either. That's what makes it hard.
My top 5 would be Vad, Landers, Centeio, DiNucci, and then Brian Shore.
I think I would probably agree with that. Maybe I flipped Shore and DiNucci, but it's like I want a dual threat, and Brian kind of was. But at the same time,
he
like,
did rush for 21 career touchdowns.
Yeah, but the athleticism for some of those guys is wild. So it makes it it's tough. I don't think most fans, if you had to pick one to start a team, are picking him. It's just the fact that he had a defense and played really well at the same time, that you can't discredit the fact that he has a national title and won 26 in a row.
Yeah, exactly. It's the perfect quarterback at the perfect time.
Right.
Now, does that mean he's the best quarterback? No. But this was taking the eye test out of it. This was taking bias out of it. This was just trying to see what they did in their JMU career, who was the best. And that's what this formula told us, was that Brian Shore was the best. I do want to say the Twitter poll results came in. We asked, who's the greatest JMU quarterback since 2000? And we included the top 4. So Brian Shore, Rodney Landers, Justin Riscotti, and Vad Lee. Brian got 35.4% of the vote. Rodney Landers got 23.5%. So he beat out Rodney. Justin Riscotti, I don't think he gets enough. I think what history has done to Riscotti, history is going to do to Brian Shore. Riscotti only got 5.5% of the vote. Vad Lee narrowly edged out Brian Shore with 35.6%. So we've been talking about how JMU Nation has kind of discredited Brian Shore. It may just be the loudest voices have discredited Brian Shore, because he was still very close to winning this Twitter poll.
That's fair. It's what a fun debate.
It's a lot of fun. Anything else you got to add before we jump on out of here? I did not expect this podcast to go 43 minutes.
No, I don't have too much else. I think it's one that I'm pretty excited to monitor over the next few years, because I do think they'll have someone here in the next 5 years that kind of makes a run for it. If they keep the program in the right trajectory, you become like the first to win a bowl game, or you actually win the Sun Belt title or something. It's going to make somebody launch up pretty quick.
I think McLeod and Barnett are positioning themselves to do that. Yeah,
because multiple years for whoever gets the gig, you would assume.
I think whoever wins this year is going to do it.
He's going to be the greatest ever.
No. I think it's going to be like a top 4.
I think so too. Yeah. That's
going to be fun
stuff.
Well, for Bennett Conlon, my name's Jack Fitzpatrick. You guys have a wonderful rest of your day. See ya.
Today, we discuss Miro. Listen, when it comes to running client workshops, the dream, of course, is to get those creative juices flowing, right? But typically what ends up happening is thousands of hours get wasted because of poorly facilitated meetings. So I have Maya with me today. She's a consultant who runs Fortune 100 workshops, from leadership training to team building, and she has the insider tip on what makes things work. Maya?
Thank you, Jason. I've been doing this a long time. My number one tip is to bring everyone into that visual collaboration platform. So personally, I use Miro, and it's completely changed how I interact with the room. You have to give people a way to feel like they're in the room even when they're not. That's something you can do easily in Miro. Otherwise, they've seen the same slides and format 1,000 times.
Falling asleep, eyes glazing over, yawns, all that.
Exactly. When people follow me on the Miro board, everyone is literally going on a journey with me. We're adding thoughts, we're reacting, and we're voting for the best ideas. It's great.
Connective magic. I like it. That's MIRO.com.